This is a very short and sweet sort of wind down practice that can be used anytime and within any context. I find that it's oftentimes a really nice practice at the end of the day when I'm preparing for bed and hoping to maybe just stretch a little bit, but mainly down regulate the nervous system and prepare for sleep. You won't need anything but yourself. I will recommend either a bolster or a pillow or a cushion or maybe a rolled up blanket. You could engage in this practice either on the floor, on the ground, or even in bed yourself. Yeah, let's get started. We're going to begin just lying down on back body. So come all the way down and then place your feet down with your knees pointing up. Take your feet wide and then just casually let your legs knock from side to side as your knees start to drift toward the right, toward the left. You can move at whatever pace you would like. This sort of rocking sensation can be a really nice way to soothe the nervous system. So knowing that, we're not aiming to, press anything or force anything. Just in general, this practice is really aiming toward just softening and relaxing. So with that, find a pace that works perfectly well for you, whether or not you're moving sort of in slow motion or a little bit more fluidly. And the next time your knees are pointed upright toward the ceiling, send your left leg long, pull your right leg in, and then just start to spiral through your right hip. If you want to hold on to your right leg in some capacity with your hands, you can, but just as useful, you can let your leg work on its own without the aid of your hands or your arms. And then let's take a really simple twist. You can draw your right leg in. Again, if you want to give it a little squeeze with one or two hands, you're welcome to, or not. And then start to guide your right leg all the way over to the left into a twist so that you're stacking your right hip on top of your left more or less. You can keep your hands stationed somewhere along your trunk, or if you'd like to move your arms into your wingspan, you could do that as well. With your gaze either pointed up or nestling your chin toward a shoulder. Find whatever is most comfortable for your neck itself. And then just indulge in a few really simple and kind of clarifying breaths. Now come back to center and switch out your legs. Send your right leg long, then pull your left leg into wherever it lands, and then just start to mobilize through the hip. Really throughout all of this practice, you don't have to overthink any of the details too much. So we're not getting into like precision alignment, fine tuning. Really, the idea is just to move in a way that feels good to ensure that the joints are pretty well lubricated. And again, we're able to relax more so into parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode. So a couple more of those little spirals through your left hip. And then finally pull your left leg inward. And then start to move toward your rotation on the second side. Left hip drawing over toward the right. You may find that your two arms and your two shoulder blades remain grounded on the floor, or on this side, your left shoulder blade might lift up pretty exponentially, and that might offer you more stretch across your chest. So fine either way. And then same deal with the angle of your head and your neck. Find what's most comfortable with you. And then breathe. As you start to wander back to center, happy baby pose. Again, so many different ways that you can engage with this shape. Either picking your legs up in the air and kind of just rolling around across your low back with your legs dangling and your arms out wide. If you want to take your hands behind your knees or to your feet somewhere, you're welcome to do that. You can play with the angles in your knees to perhaps find a bit of a stretch along the inseams of your thighs as you compress throughout the front line of your hips. And then next up, we are going to be moving into supported bridge pose. A couple different ways you can approach this. If you do indeed have a block or a bolster or a blanket or anything around that you can place underneath the weight of your pelvis, that'll be great. But if you don't have anything with you, you can place your hands underneath you, palms facing down, so that you can just drop the weight of your pelvis down onto the tops of your hands. This can also be a nice option if your hands are feeling particularly fatigued and kind of tight, if you've had a long day working with your hands. So this can be kind of nice just to sort of roll the weight of your pelvis across the tops of your hands while compressing some of the tissues in your hands. But otherwise, I'm going to grab my bolster and place it underneath. So just kind of make note that we're not placing necessarily all of that support underneath the low back itself, but more so underneath your pelvis, underneath your hips. So once you have whatever system of support that you're opting for underneath you, you can choose whether or not you'd like to keep your knees bent with your feet on the ground. Some people like to take a long stretch through the legs. That's fine too. And we are going to linger here just for a minute for the sake of time in this practice. But when you're returning to this practice again, feel free to take more time. You can again just set up your hands, your arms thoughtfully in a way that's most comfortable for you. And then finding just a gentle nudging of your chin toward your chest so that the back of your neck is long and spacious. And then let your breathing follow suit so that there's this quality of spaciousness inside of your breath. If you'd like to place your hands on top of your trunk to feel around for some of that dialogue between your breathing and that kind of central portion of your trunk moving down toward your belly, you could do that as well. Where we're going to be heading next is a supported legs up the wall pose. If you happen to be near a wall and you'd like to utilize a wall to literally put your feet up against it, or even if you're in bed and you have like a headboard nearby, you could do that. But if you're in more of an open space area, you can just simply keep whatever you have underneath you, whether or not it's your hands or a bolster or a block or a blanket or anything, and start to elevate your feet up into the air. And I oftentimes find when I practice this pose, when I am kind of in the middle of a room and I'm using a prop underneath me, I very often will transition, just like we did from bridge pose, into legs up the wall, and I'll oftentimes have to scooch my prop a little bit further up my back, and that tends to feel better. So what we're really looking for is for you to have the ability to hold this posture, hold this shape without having to do a ton of muscular work. So that's sort of why we're using these props. It's why a wall is really nice if you want to use a wall as well, so that you can still, inside of the pose, be relatively disengaged from a muscular perspective. And then the same tenets ring true in terms of setting up your hands and your arms in a way that's most comfortable for you. Your eyes can be open or closed. And again, we're not going to hang out here super long inside of this practice today, but I love to hold this pose for anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes, depending upon the day and how I'm feeling. And where we're going to be heading next, and this will be our final posture of this practice, again, start to bend your knees. If you'd like to let your thighs kind of knock in toward your front body for a moment, you can do that. But then eventually you can start to lower and tap your toes down toward the ground. And then if you are working with a prop underneath you, you can just shove that down, so you can just lift the weight of your pelvis up just enough so that you can start to work that prop down until it lands underneath your knees. You could certainly practice this pose with nothing underneath you, though I really, really recommend using some support. So in terms of how you set up now your lower body and your legs, you can either let your legs just reach straight out from your hips, or if you'd prefer to bring the soles of your feet toward one another and widen from knee to knee, kind of externally rotate through the hips a little bit into Baddha Konasana or something similar to that, you could do that as well. And then I'll recommend placing hands on top of your trunk at least for a few seconds so that you can attempt to initiate a quality of breathing that really digs into, again, a belly sort of breath, because we know that this is a really nice way to engage with the parasympathetic nervous system. So since we're moving into that state of rest, we can use our breathing as a tool. And then beyond that, your breath can reflect inhales and exhales through the nose. A longer exhale through the nose will, again, help to ease into that rest and digest mode. So if you would like to connect a count to your breath, you might consider an inhale for 4 and an exhale for 6. And if you do feel inclined to allow just a big sigh to escape your mouth, again, a really nice way to soften away stress. So even some inhales through the nose and big wide sighs out through the mouth are really, really helpful. You can remain in this shape for as long as you'd like as well. Hopefully ready to wind down for sleep. Nice work.